Welcome everybody to the second panel discussion of the Mahogany Thoughts podcast. We're actually streaming live on Facebook on today, May the 16th. We have our 6 panelists with us today. First, I would like to introduce, I'm your host, Dr. Terrence Duncan. Also, I have Charletta Taylor and Terrence Butler. So just briefly around the room, Charletta, how you doing?
I am doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Butler, what's going on with you?
Ain't nothing happening, man. Just grateful, peaceful.
Where's my bird?
It's raining, man. So he out there in the nest somewhere, I'm assuming.
Yeah, the bird. Hey,
I'll be outside.
Yeah, it's gonna be our first episode without the bird.
Right. Our ratings will probably be terrible now.
Yeah.
without our good luck showing.
Absolutely. Going around the room, we got Tessie, Amos, Q5 representing the shirt.
What's going on, good people? Tessie Amos III of This Too Shall Pass Life Consulting Firm. Just here to do my part, and hopefully we make an indent in some of this nonsense around the world today.
Absolutely. Next, we have Miss Tyler Roy. How you doing, Miss Roy?
You hear me?
Now I can't hear you.
You can't hear me at all?
Well, now I can hear you.
What? Can
No, at
everybody
first when
else
we
hear
started
me?
talking, I couldn't hear you.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm Tyler Roy, licensed clinical professional counselor. Just here trying to raise awareness and spread some education to help our folks get more acclimated and comfortable with the idea of mental health treatment.
Thank you much for joining the show again. We got Z5B, Cecilia Carter.
Hey. Again, Cecilia Carter, licensed professional counselor. I am excited to get into some discussion today.
We got Phi Beta Sigma, Etoya White, Go Mob.
Man, you know what it is. Go Mob, Hustle City, USA. I am Etoya White, founder of Etoya White Therapy and Coaching. I'm the jeweler, man. I'm just here to drop these gems. Let's get it.
Absolutely. Finally, we have Miss Carmel Brown. How you doing?
Hello. I'm Carmel Brown, licensed clinical professional counselor. I am owner of Carmel Brown Counseling and also co-owner of Club Exhilaration Wellness Center. Glad to be here today.
Thank you. I'm glad that you're all on the show. We do have last week's episode on YouTube. We also actually have it on the podcast, Mahogany Thoughts Podcast, which is on Spotify. You can also go on my website, www.drtduncan.com. You can subscribe to the website, and you can also have access to the podcast. I'm actually working on the website. These fine therapists, specialists who hopped on this show these last 2 weeks, I promised them, and I will deliver. Their information is going to be on my website page. So for those who are looking for mental health services, whether it's a single parent, whether it's dealing with your children, whether it's marital counseling, or just any kind of personal health and wellness, these 6 special individuals will be on my page, and you'll have access directly to the website. So this is more than a conversation. We're about action. Everybody on this show is about action. So we're going to go at it. Today's panel discussion, the keynote panel discussion, will be actually held by Charletta and Mr. Butler, and it's going to be on faith and mental health. But before we do that, we're going to just talk about some of the issues that's been happening the last week. You know, we talked about the shooting we talked about the discovery of the video last week with the shooting down in Georgia. We talked about, how it affects our psyche as a community. But, two major events that happened, I think, that we need to address is we have the violence that we have amongst each other, that has to be addressed. We stay in St. Louis, everybody on the panels in the St. Louis area. Between our last podcast to today, and I actually counted it, there was 18 shootings and 4 murders in the St. Louis area. So panel, Tessie, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on that.
Man, excuse me. For years, I've been pondering and trying to figure out why is it so easy for us to kill ourselves. And we had a talk when we do our Let's Talk event, which is usually a live event, but since then we've gone virtual. And I deduced it to because we always have to be prepared for our enemy. And what has happened, in my humble opinion, and through my professional studies and what I've observed, is I deduced that we must view ourselves as the enemy. So basically, when I look in the mirror, I see myself, but I see every other black man that look like me, walk like me, talk like me, and act like me. And for some reason, I'm afraid, but I'm too, quote unquote, manly to admit that I'm afraid. And so all of this fear and this bravado, this macho, this machismo, if you will, it makes me willing to go that far with the brother that I see. We do not love ourselves. And I can say this over and over again, because the acts and the history of our acts committed upon ourselves weekly, monthly, yearly, throughout the decades proves we simply don't love ourselves. Because, and I say that because love is an action word. And we don't act like we love one another. We don't forgive each other fast enough. We'll take to social media and defend the murderers of our mob before we forgive a brother for stepping on our brand new Jordans in a club. You know, we want, if something has taught us and shown us that we are our own worst enemy. And so that's why, in my opinion, we go after each other that hard. It saddens me, because when I see another black man, I see a potential friend. I see a father. I don't want to leave his child fatherless. I see a brother. You know what I'm saying? I see a fellow Greek. I see another peaceful man. I see a king. I don't want to remove these people from the planet. I don't see my enemy, but I've had an opportunity and a time to fall in love with myself, which also allows me to be a real man, if I can quote that, and love you too, brother. And love you too, brother, and love you too, brother, and say to another black man, bro, I love you, and I'm okay with that. And it's not enough of that going around. We're not okay with ourselves. And therefore, mental wellness is really dope, as Candace Cox would say.
Cecilia?
I would agree with Tessie, and I would also look at it from the perspective of, again, African Americans in the United States have been exposed to trauma for centuries, and here in America. And so considering that some of our responses to one another are trauma responses, the idea of safety, where I can go, maybe I think I can go in the suburbs and I don't have to worry so much about locking my doors. But when I come to when I go to the neighborhood, I'm concerned, I'm looking around, and these are my people. So considering how trauma and the way we've been treated and the way we've unconsciously been taught to see ourselves, that informs the way that we interact with one another. And so what I would offer us as a community is to be a little bit more patient and compassionate with one another. I'm 2 or 3 generations removed from slavery. So my great grandmother, her people were slaves, or even if they weren't slaves, they were sharecroppers. That's not that far. That wasn't that long ago. So I would encourage us to be a little bit more patient with each other in figuring out how to deal with our trauma with one another.
Tyler?
I think everybody has already said some really key points, and I think it kind of piggybacks off of the discussion that we had last week. It's just all of this unresolved anger coupled with unresolved and undiagnosed mental health conditions. We talk about generational curses. We talk about no problem solving skills whatsoever. We talk about anger that has given way to just complete despondency. A lot of each generation is becoming progressively more aggressive. They're becoming less compassionate. There's absolutely no fear, of any kind of authoritative figures, period, which we understand where some of that discord and some of that disregard for authorities have come. But when you have people, a legion of people who are just angry all the time, they don't have any reservations, they're despondent. They don't see that they have any other options. A lot of this generation, they're excited when they make 18. So they're constantly surrounded by other people who not only partake in the same things that they do, but encourage that, including parents. So there's no problem solving skills. They're just, a generation of despondent people They don't feel like they have any options. So to them, there's no fear of what consequences are. They're not afraid of being arrested. They're not afraid of going to jail or any kind of long-term consequences like that, or being on probation. Carmel can attest to this. When I was a probation officer for the state of Missouri, one of the reasons that discouraged me is because I would see the same cycle of people come through 2, 3, 4 times in 4 years' time. So there's no fear of consequences, so there's no deterrent.
Carmel?
I think everybody's pretty much covered everything that needs to be covered. I think I would just add, poor conflict resolution skills, and then also I think that historically we have to look at some of the other behaviors that we see in the African American community and African American families in regards to aggression. For example, spanking our children, beating children to the extent that it's almost illegal or criminal. And I mean, historically that has occurred, and you have to go back to the slavery days when you look at what occurs when a person doesn't do what you want them to do, when they don't comply. Well, it turns into aggression. And so from one generation to the next, we've kind of carried that on inside of our homes and outside of the homes. And so I think the aggression that we see on the streets is just an extension of that. And we have these Black Lives Matters movements and all that, but we have to believe that Black Lives Matter ourselves if we want other people to believe that. We have to live that and follow that. We can't just say it, we can't just protest whenever it's going on, when we're abused by or killed by other people. It has to be a way of life for all of us.
Before Etoya hops on, I'm just waiting for him to get situated. You good, Fred?
Yeah, I'm straight.
Okay, just before he hops on and has this piece of stuff, just to add to that, is really interesting because I tell people that I know more people that have been killed through gun violence than police brutality. So, I mean, it's an unfortunate circumstance, but I think all of us know several people that's been, murdered, whether it be directly or indirectly, which is why I posed the topic and kind of show the disparity between the conversations we had last weekend and just the lack of conversation that we had over the past week. Fred, go ahead and add your piece, sir.
Yeah, man, I think that, so psychology, right? So human psychology is not, like, it's not a cereal brand. This is not, this is not something that's in the Cracker Jack box. Like, human psychology matters. And so generation over generation of desensitization, right? Because it takes a soulless, conditioned individual to cause that amount of harm to another person. You have to be void of something in order to harm somebody that way, to the extent that willfully that this person will no longer live or exist as a result of these actions. And so we're talking about decade over decade of this psychological and emotional conditioning that has taken place that results in a lot of what we see today. The OGs, we always talk about how music and TV has changed, and we don't need Showtime after dark because we can get it at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. This is the same thing has taken place again. So violence and this behavior, the perpetuation of this behavior, man, that's entertainment, bro. It's not like, it doesn't become tragic until it affects somebody personally. It's entertainment until it hits your front door. So that's where we as men, and Tessie said it the best, man, like, and when we say do the self-work, I think people have to understand what it really means. I said last week, and I'm always talking in spaces where, for men and boys in and from Black and brown spaces, how you see other men is how you're going to treat other men. So if you see other men as a threat, then that's how that interaction is going to come off. Your inability to look another man square in the face and say, hey, bro, what's good? Like, how you doing? Or shake his hand, or dap him up, or give him a nigga nod, or open the door for him, or say thank you, or be gracious, or something like that. Like, that deals with a person's internal conditioning, again, just based on this psychological condition that ultimately gets passed down. And one of the sisters just said too, like, these concepts of maleness, manhood, and masculinity that get passed down, and we perpetuate these things through discipline systems and so on and so forth. Like, this is how we get where we are.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, panel. Butler, you have any words to add to that?
I've seen I used to actually teach middle school math in St. Louis City for about 3 years. So I had a lot of interactions with a lot of youngsters, and I saw that a lot of them were angry a lot. Ones who I would notice who would have issues as far as not doing their work and stuff, I try to pull them to the side and talk to them, and they just they can never really focus on the school because they have so much going on at home. I can always see the anger and the rage of what I had. One kid, he I forget this guy. I don't remember his last name. His first name was Patrick, and he broke down just crying, just talking about how bad it was at home. And he was a guy that skipped school a lot. He actually got caught either with some drugs or drug paraphernalia at school. So I don't know whatever happened to him, but I saw at 12, 13, just how angry they were. And they're dealing with things that they shouldn't have to deal with and have nowhere to kind of release any frustration or anger because they have to grow up so fast based on where they grew up. So I think all this has taught me anything, just listening to the mental health side is I just implore, and one thing I'm going to definitely do myself is become a mentor to somebody, join a group, become a mentor, just be an outlet for somebody. I have 3 kids myself, but if I can just, be a mentor to one, just try to do my part. Because I see how much that's needed just for them to have someone to release and talk and hear from another man that they can kind of trust and relate to.
Charletta?
I think that what Butler just said is part of the solution, because I think that's what makes the connection from the discussions to the application. I think that when we have the discussions and we start these dialogues, that puts the representation out there. We do the live feed so people that look like us can start to see, okay, these people look like us. We can relate to these people. So it plants the seed. Then what begins to happen is men start to mentor these boys in the neighborhoods. Women like myself start to mentor these young ladies in the neighborhoods. We start to teach practical life skill classes to the moms in the neighborhoods. That's the only way that it's going to make the connection from the live feed discussions to the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it just becomes us just talking amongst ourselves, and we still have a community of disconnect, and it continues to just be statistics. So I think that's how we bring it all together.
I agree, and I think every panelist made a good point. And one of the, like I said last episode, and just even in the beginning, and everything that I'm doing, these are passion projects because I'm Black. All of us on this panel are Black, and so
what?
Yeah, I know, right? Surprise. But just to be able to say, just to be able to not only achieve the levels of what we've accomplished, it has to be important for us to go back for those reasons, to be able to show, you can look exactly like us and still be successful and still learn how to have a capacity of love. You're not weak for showing emotion. If anything, from a male perspective, I would say your emotions can actually be your strength, because You're actually unlocking a lot of areas and stuff that would otherwise be dormant if you were more blocking your feelings off. So mentoring is definitely a big deal. And not only that, but just continuing this conversation. And I just hope and pray that, somebody look at this video, whether it be next week or a year from now, and see that these are some of the first steps, the major steps. This is not on CNN. This is not on Fox. This is not on MSNBC. It's not on BET. These are people from the block. These are people that, you've seen or interact with on a regular basis, or actually having these conversations. And I think that's what makes a difference. And Tessie said it earlier, before we went live or started recording. about being grassroots. Everything has to be grassroots, you know, from here on out. I mean, not just the mental health, but other areas. The next topic I want to get on, just quickly around the room, so Charletta and Butler can manage the faith aspect. We talked about it before the podcast started, but I wanted to make sure I got the name right for just legal reasons. I want nobody later on the line saying, man, that wasn't me. But Bootsy Badass claimed that he paid for oral sex for his 12-year-old son and for his 13-year-old nephew. We had a conversation before we went on live, but I just think it's pretty despicable. I think it's, you know, it's trite. It's 2020. You know what I mean? There's no excuse for A, not knowing, and B, thinking that's acceptable. But unfortunately, you know, yeah, it's Bootsy Badass, and he talked about it on Instagram or YouTube or whatever and stuff. But stuff like this continues to happen. So we'll start off from the bottom left and work our way around the room and just get your thoughts on the matter. We'll start off with Carmel and then Etoya.
Well, you know, I'd like to just call attention to the fact that these entertainers are, they don't see themselves as role models all the time, but they actually are. And in fact, you know, the community listens to them more than they listen to us licensed clinicians. You know, when you look at, you know, the Red Table and all these celebrities who have clinical shows and they're not necessarily clinicians, we have in our music and in our movies, and it's perpetuating violence and just illicit behavior. And I think that we have to somehow get to a point where we talk to our children just about what their roles mean and how, you know, some of them may not be healthy. They may need some treatment or some type of professional attention, you know, themselves. And so I think that they are irresponsible with their roles. And I think that's kind of what it boils down to. And I think it's completely unprofessional for him to say such a thing. I think it was very negligent. And this is the type of stuff that our kids are listening to. They're watching it and they see it as okay. They see it as appropriate, as normal. Same thing with the, you know, the violence in the lyrics. You know, we talk about shooting people and how many people you've murdered and all this, and they see that as something that's desirable. And you know, it's gonna happen until somebody does something about it. This is stuff that should be addressed in some type of manner. And I'm not the one who says how that should be addressed, whether it's a legal issue, a clinical issue, or what. But yeah, I despise that type of behavior.
Fred? You're on mute, fam.
All right, let me do that again, man. Just so
You shaking your head said enough, but I know there's more.
Man, listen. So I'm here for the bullshit today. So listen, there's so many problems with this, right? And Carmel, you know, hit on some pretty important things about. You know, I tell men all the time, like you know, we've heard from, you know, Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan said he never saw himself as man. Everybody's a role model. Your only choice is what role you play. That's it. Everybody's a role model. Mm-hmm. So my issue in this situation, man, and much like Sis just said, like people listen to this cat. You feel me? Like people follow this dude, and you know, other people who have the same ideology. And my concern with the number one is as we talk, you know, before is the levels and layers in this situation with regard to what constitutes abuse, sexual abuse, and what doesn't, what constitutes, you know, again, something that will otherwise be a crime, right? If you're admitting to, you know, having your kids participate in illegal activity that you facilitate, I mean, there's just so many layers with this. And then we also have to have.
Cut out, Frat.
Maleness and how I'm gonna let my man touch on, you know, what he touched on earlier. I'm not gonna steal his thunder because he had me ready to pass the collection plate, so I won't even touch that with regard to the ladies. I'm gonna let him get, because I got to hear one more again when he bring that thunder. So, but these are the issues that we have, right? So, what about this situation now? As somebody who works in an educational setting, and I have my finger on 5,600 kids
what about this situation now? We take this 12-year-old and this 13-year-old and we say, okay, it's okay for you to have sex or be involved sexually with a 30-year-old woman. The problem emotionally becomes, okay, now that he's in a school setting or when he goes to college, what about this situation now will prevent him from entitling himself to the body of another young woman, right? So we have all these cases where these cats are entitled, they missed the big shot, and then they go to college and they think they can steal it and not get in trouble or whatever have you. This is that level of entitlement that we create when we pass down these generational attitudes of foolishness and entitlement from generation to generation about what maleness, manhood, and masculinity is. Like, why does getting head, how's that the measuring stick for maleness, manhood, and masculinity? Please tell me where's the manual that states that this is what we have, this is the new rite of passage, having relations with a 30-year-old woman or whatever have you now, because he's going to be the one that's in my office for childhood trauma, and somebody's going to be breaking that, that copay or that cash pay or whatever have you when he ends up in my chair because of some childhood trauma associated with somebody willfully violating him sexually. Yeah. Man, let me stop.
Cecilia?
Etoya spoke a lot to it. I think a couple of things. Number one, that's the first thing that sticks out to me is this idea of masculinity within the hip hop culture, and how we understand that, or how we understand that men should behave and how they should treat women. And then this idea of, we get so confused and we don't understand like these ideas of sexuality and why like some of our men have these warped ideas of relationships, why they have these warped ideas of intimacy and communication. And it's a lot of because these ideas that we have set forth as masculine. And so, like I was saying earlier, we kind of throw around the idea of toxic masculinity, and some people use it in instances where it's not valid. But I think this is an idea where this is a perfect instance where the idea of toxic masculinity and this bravado of sex and sexualization and all of that other stuff that can be detrimental to a young child plays in, and we need to consider that. The other thing is, in our community, we tend to sweep things under the rug and pretend like it's not that big of an idea. It's not that big of a deal. So we elect certain people to get a pass. Celebrities get passes. Sorry, ministers, the big folks in the church, they get passes. Uncles and daddies get passes. And so when we do that, we invalidate the experience of the children and the victims in the situation. And right now, because Boosie is Boosie and he's big in the hood, people are willing to go to bat and fight for him because he did something wrong, but they are so unwilling to acknowledge it because he's Boosie. So we got a lot of things at play here that we need to honor. Masculinity, what that looks like, and sweeping stuff under the rug, depending on who it is. So those are my thoughts.
Tyler, and then Tessie, I want you to bring it home.
Okay. So, well, everybody has said some very pertinent things, but I think Cecilia nailed it. When we talk about warped, twisted, demented ideas of sexuality, I want to kind of switch gears here a little bit. One of my licensures is I'm a licensed sex offender treatment provider, and so that's with juveniles and adults. And a lot of people ask me, well, why would you want to provide that kind of service? Well, there's a segue. The reason I even became interested in being a provider of such services is because I was doing so much on the victim end that I kind of wanted to have an idea in totality of how this cycle worked. So that being said, I want to switch gears a little bit. We know that Boosie is jacked up. It was horrible. It was deplorable what he's done. His son has been traumatized. We get that. But when we're talking about all the different layers, I'm not hearing a lot of dialogue about how sick and demented a 30-year-old or 20, whatever adult woman has to be able to be coerced to engage in sexual activity with a 14-year-old boy. We're not just talking, okay, you're paid for the service. So now not only are you a prostitute, you're also a pedophile. You know what I mean? And what's scary about this whole dynamics is that, just like Cecilia said, because he's Boosie, he will get a pass. His fan base is going to be dismissive about it. What they're going to do is the people who are floored, or who, you know, us who are just kind of floored and disgusted and dismayed by it, we're going to have these dialogues amongst ourselves. And the people who defend him are going to say, oh, but you know, that doesn't take away from his talent. That doesn't take away from his music contributions. It doesn't take, so they keep kind of making excuses, and there's no real accountability. And you know what, we'll talk about this for a couple weeks, and then next thing you know, he'll be making something else. It'll be swept under the rug, and we'll be on to the next thing. So there's no accountability. And there's always going to be that one person, you know, that one diehard fan base is going to say, oh, but you know, just like they have with other celebrities, you know, I'm going to still listen to his music. You know, but you know, don't take away from his talent. You got to give him, he's a musical genius. He's this, that, and the other. You know, and the bottom line is there's no accountability. And when there's no accountability, the person who's perpetrating, they don't feel like they have to stop. They may get a slap on the wrist, and it's back to business as usual. You know, and then again, this woman, do you think she won't do it for somebody else? You know what I'm saying? The next person that comes along, there's probably going to be any retribution for her either. So it's just a cycle that never stops. And one of the things that we have to do is, you know, we have to get away from being so dismissive, being so forgiving about things that need to be seriously addressed in order to kind of stop the cycle from being as vicious as it is.
Mm-hmm. Tessie, man, you was on a roll before we went live, so we expect that same fire. But the only caveat is, I'm about to keep you under 3 minutes. We can talk about it more on the postscripts if you're able to stay on after that.
I got you covered, man. First of all, I sincerely hope that Lil Boosie is lying. And I say that because men have been lying on their phallus since lies have been able to be told. So I hope this is just yet another lie that this brother is telling. But just in case it's the truth, let's go ahead and address it. There's a patriarchal system by which we've all been forced to live by. We were born, our generation was born to this patriarchal system. There was a time that existed when a woman had a place and she knew her place. Now that was wrong. Don't get me twisted, but that we know that time existed. That the woman knew her place. She cooked, she cleaned. When the man come around, she becomes subservient. We knew that. Since education has been given to us freely, and some of us had to actually pay for it. I went on academic scholarships. That's why I said freely. We now know that place doesn't exist, nor has it ever existed. All we did was subjected women to a lower standard of living because it raised our standard of living. Now, that's easy to do in the African-American community as a man because we are seen so low anyway. In order for us to feel anything, we gotta have somebody up under us. And for too long, and for so many years, we've always chosen our sisters to do that too. A lot of pimp movies, a lot of rap videos where all of these beautiful women in it who otherwise, if it wasn't for the little paycheck they was getting, those ugly guys probably couldn't stand a chance to collect 20 beautiful women poolside at their party. So we know it was all money and all of those things put in it. But we use those images to further hold women down. And so what I want to teach and what I want my legacy to be whenever it's over is I want to be known as the guy who no longer fed into the patriarchal system. I don't even want you to say that, well, Tessie gave women a fair chance, because I don't have the authority to give nor take the chances away from women. I don't have the authority to give nor take the opportunities away from women. They are because they are. They're here and they exist and their existence matters. And I don't have the authority to say that it doesn't. And we got to stop thinking like that. And if we could possibly stop thinking like that, if we could start with our own daughters and our own nieces, we can begin to change the complexion of our culture and our community. We are kings, but we have queens, and queens don't get treated that way. You do not take a queen and pay her money to perform sex acts on your son so that maybe he'll be okay later. That's not a king action, and that's not a queen action. So just as Boosie has responsibility in that, she did too. But we all have to step to the table. We all have to step up. And we got to stop doing that. We owe it to ourselves. So anytime one of the quickest lessons that I taught my sons on how to treat girls when you move along in this life, because I'm not going everywhere they go.
Right.
Would you want your mama to do that?
Absolutely.
Or would you want your sister to do that? If you can't see your sister doing what you asking that little girl to do, then don't ask her to do it. If you don't want your mama doing it, if you can't see your mama doing the same thing, then use that as your barrier to not even ask that little girl to do that for you. That's just one quick way to get our sons back on target. Now, there's more lessons that go with that. You know what I'm saying? Because we also got to start teaching our young ladies the value of themselves. And we don't have to wait for their mama to do it, their favorite aunt, their favorite female teacher. As a man, I can teach a woman her value just by getting out of the way and letting her live.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a right to my wife's body until she gives me that. And that's considered a privilege. And so when she so privileges me, I enjoy myself to the fullest. There are no expectations on my wife and her body at all from me. And I want other men to just get that, man. Unplug from this system in which we live and realize there's a far better way for us to live. We are kings, but we have queens. Let's do king and queenly shit and stop being peasants out here. And that's all I can kind of squeeze in 3 minutes. I just wanted to have an impact. And I want these sisters to be okay out here, but okay because we just left them alone. We just let them do.
Mm-hmm.
Man, real quick, I know, Tessie, you got something going on tomorrow. Just brief little 30-second plug. What you got going on tomorrow? And do you have any other live events?
Yeah, there's another podcast I'll be involved in tomorrow. It's called Mental Care, MEN capitalized, then care behind that. And that's with the Talented 10th and their fathers, man. This is two organizations here in St. Louis that are really trying to make an impact. These men that are founders and fathers of these organizations are young Black men in the community and trying to make their way. One of them, Brad, I consider my nephew. I'll be introduced to the other one tomorrow, and then he too shall be considered my nephew. But I love doing this kind of work, and so I'll be on that podcast tomorrow at 1 o'clock. It'll also be Zoom, and it'll also be live. So I'll be broadcasting that. I've been putting it out all week, so just look for me there. And that one's geared toward men and mental health. This one is more geared toward the entire community and the entire culture. And so tomorrow it's gonna be real hot fire for me, unless they mute me or quiet me down, because I'm kind of beefing with my brothers, man. We got to catch up, and the time is of the essence, man. I got a lot of friends that look at me and look at my marital situation, and they model it. They want to, and I'm trying to teach them how to do that, man. And it's nothing that I did special. I just realized, I woke up one day and realized that although I am the shit, I'm not the shit.
Tessie likes to go over 30 seconds. So
I'm sorry.
It's all good. We just want to make sure everybody has, I know some of the people are going to have to drop off at 5, so I just want to make sure everybody had the time. But we definitely can chop it up when we once we get past the 5 o'clock hour on that one. So we'll keep it up.
Sir.
Etoya, I know you got a podcast. Ladies, do y'all have a podcast or anything, events going on or anything like that? Before I slide to Etoya and then to Charletta and Terrence?
No events currently.
Okay. Etoya, I know you got a podcast. And also I know you've been doing some stuff prior to the pandemic. Quick 60-second plug.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's some big shit on deck, man. I got obviously my show that airs on 881thetruth.com Wednesdays at 7 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. Central Time. It's called You Good, Bruh. And, that's exciting to do. I also got a couple of events coming up myself and award-winning filmmaker, John Alexander. We're going to be doing a collaboration, man, on next Sunday, the 24th. I'm actually going to be the moderator for the release of his new short film called Enough. And so it's really in line with what Tessie was just talking about, man. The film is about self-sabotage and some of the things that, in that lens, man. So I'm going to be moderating some Q&A after we do the virtual premiere or live screening. So I'm excited about that. And I also have a project on deck with Wendy Odwar, who is the Miss Kenya USA. She reached out to me to do a collaboration, man. So I'm going to have some stuff out with her pretty soon as well.
Talented people of color, melanin strong. Good job, everybody. Charletta and Terrence, we're going to talk about faith and mental health. This is the part where I'm just going to observe, and then I'm just going to let you guys handle it till the close. Integrate any other questions that you might see fit, you know, that's from the panel or from the audience, and you guys can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, all good. Very interesting topic I'm looking forward to getting into, just because me personally, I grew up in the Black church from by the time I was saying Gaga Goo Goo. Fall in the background. So I was the one that, you know, we went to church, went back to church after for the program, and if they had late service, was always doing that. I don't know if I went to church during the week a lot, maybe once or twice, just because my mom worked a lot. So I'm not sure of that, but still do the day. I just know the Black church is the foundation of a lot of people's lives. So I understand that mental health, that people who are Christians, I won't even say look down, but I think they look at it as a secondary answer for what they're going through, because they've been taught, they've been inundated to thinking all I need is Jesus. All I need is Jesus, and everything's going to work out. But it's prayer about everything's going to work out. So a question I would have to the panel is, have you seen people who are heavy in the church have more mental health issues than those who are not so deep in the church?
You know what? Before we answer those questions, let's see. There's 5 of us. Let's go ahead and try to break it up in groups. You know, like a group panel discussion, maybe 2 or 3. And then Charlotte, you can ask your question as well. Just so that way we can try to make sure that both of y'all have an opportunity to get your questions fielded in. So go ahead, Terrence, select your individuals.
I'll start with Tessie and work my way down.
The answer to that is pretty broad as far as, so I'll just do it this. I have noticed that people in the church that swear up and down all they need is Jesus, I've seen people like that suffer from mental illness and not even pay attention to it because they waiting on some miracle to fall out of the sky. And I'm not here to insult anybody's faith stance. I promise you I respect all, but I'm a Christian man myself. I grew up in the church. My mother kept us in the church, and then I came back to the church as an adult on my own. I just believe that faith without works is dead. So you do need Jesus, and Jesus is all we need, but he requires for us to do work because he himself worked when he was here with us, and he is working to get back to us now. So I'm gonna just leave it like that. Faith without works is dead.
Okay, Cecilia.
Yeah, so I try to approach my therapy in general from a strength-based perspective. So if faith is something that you use to help you get through, then I encourage you to do that. And when we consider how religion has played a part in some of our patterns of abuse, of negative thinking, of fill in the blank, we also have to consider what our goal is and how some of these beliefs, I'm not talking about any specific faith, but how some of the beliefs that come along with it, i.e. the Bible says I shouldn't get a divorce, but my husband is busting me upside the head. We have to consider if my goal is to be happy and healthy, and if it's God's goal and his will for me to be happy and healthy, we got to consider what belief is getting in the way, is acting as a barrier to me getting happy. And if that means I need to reconsider what that scripture meant, then that's what we do in counseling, and try to figure out how we can understand it and understand the belief that we have and address it in the way that we need, that's going to help us reach our goal. So I think that faith is very helpful. But when it becomes a negative thing and a negative belief, we got to reconsider what we're talking about.
Quick question for you, Cecilia. How can faith be negative when dealing with mental health?
Okay, so when I say faith, I think I'm speaking about specific aspects. So like the idea of, again, I'll use abuse because that happens a lot. physical abuse, right? And so the response that I have gotten is the Bible says don't get a divorce. So when we talk about that, what do we mean? What does God mean when he says don't get a divorce? What does God mean when he says is I come that you have life and that more abundantly? Does abundantly mean that I get to be hurt physically, mentally, whatever, fill in the blank? And that doesn't necessarily have to do specifically with God. We could talk about Buddha. We could insert any faith. When we consider what the goal is and what God wants for us, we have to reconsider what is the belief, and that's what I meant by faith. What is the tradition or the belief or the specific rule that's getting in the way of us reaching to where it is that we want to go?
Gotcha. Tyler?
I want to say a couple things. First of all, you can be traumatized in the church. I have worked specifically with people who've experienced their trauma in the church. That's the first thing I want to say. You can also be deep in your ministry and still be struggling with your own mental health issues as well. So, you know, that's something that we have to keep at the forefront too. You know, when we think, you know, of course we want our pastors and our first ladies and our bishops, we want them to be okay. And we want to know that they are pillars for us, but we also have to take into consideration, guess what? They are human. So they go through their own trials and tribulations, and some of those things get projected onto the very people that they're ministering to. So that's something to keep in mind too. I am relieved to see, especially in the past 2 years, I've had a lot of ministerial leaders and things like that have reached out to me. So there seems to be some kind of shift in the ideology that, oh, we just gonna pray this away. I think sometimes there's an understanding that a lot of the issues within the congregation are a lot more deeply seated than, oh, we just gonna pray for you, or oh, we just gonna, you know, no, they realize that it requires some extra intervention, that no matter how learned you are, no matter how accomplished you are in the ministry, there's still some clinical interventions and things that you may not be privy to. So I'm glad to see that there's a shift with that, but I think we've got to understand, you know, also too, that trauma can occur anywhere. And just like, you know, when we're talking about where am I getting my help, I need to be assured that I'm getting help from a reliable source. And if you're dealing with somebody who has their own unaddressed or underaddressed mental health issues, then that's a classic example of the blind leading the blind.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say this, I want to also kind of piggyback on something that Cecilia said too. I too am very strength-based. I bill myself as a cognitive behavioral therapist. So even when I'm asked to do speaking events at churches or church-related or church, you know, related organizations, I do my disclaimer and I specifically say I am not a Christian counselor. I'm a counselor who happens to be Christian, but I'm not a Christian counselor. Exactly. And I think it's important to delineate that and to make sure that that is kind of inferred, no, that's expressed before you get started.
Okay, Tyler, what's the difference between a Christian counselor and a counselor who is Christian?
A Christian counselor, in my opinion, and I implore any of you to kind of jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. In my opinion, a Christian counselor, that is their base. You know, it's not that they're not clinical, but they're more likely to scripture, and you know, they're going to give you parables, and they're going to kind of take, you know, they're really going to take a biblical approach. That, you know, whereas I'm going to take more of a theoretical approach. I'm going to tell you what Glasser says. I'm going to tell you what, you know, maybe some Freudian stuff in there. I'm going to tell you what CBT, what the concepts and theoretical approaches of CBT have taught me, or rational emotive therapy. You know, that's what I'm going to rely on. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you can't be thankful. I'm not going to tell you that you can't have an attitude of gratitude. I'm not going to tell you that you can't, you know, that you can't, that your faith is not important, because it is. But in terms of a Christian counselor, I'm not going to, every time we start, we're not going to start with prayer. We're not going, and I'm going to take your lead in the course of our therapy sessions. If that's a door that you open in terms of talking about your faith and what your religious convictions are, then we can certainly explore those things in terms of how you're going to incorporate that into your therapeutic process and your therapy goals. But I'm not going to be the one, you know, starting off with prayer, ending with prayer, giving you scriptures to read in bibliotherapy and things like that. That is some, in my opinion, the difference between a traditional, you know, a CBT therapist and somebody who is billing themselves as a Christian therapist or a Christian counselor, if that makes sense.
Perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, perfect sense. Hey, thanks. And we'll definitely try to get back around again. Charletta, do you have any questions from a faith-based perspective to the panel?
I do. So as therapists, when you have someone that's coming in, how do you remain objective and non-judgmental if you have a difference of opinion in their position? How do you put aside your own personal opinion from whatever their issue is? How do you remain objective when you're doing your counseling? And I'll address that question to Etoya.
So for me, I mean, obviously I'm always aware, you know, we talked about last week, counselor, know thyself. And so there's going to be any number of issues that we are, you know, that clients present with. And, you know, first and foremost, again, is just understanding myself. I'm not there to laud myself or, interject myself or my ideals or whatever have you into this client session. My job is to shotgun, you know, direct, have a conversation, and it's my, you know, ethical obligation to make sure that I don't make any part of this process or that client's process about me. So that, you know, unless we're having, you know, a different level of conversation, you know, my own value and belief systems don't even enter into the conversation. And so that's, you know, that becomes part of the therapeutic relationship building process. Then just also understanding, being clear with yourself about what your ideals are. And if you as a practitioner are clear about what your own values and ideals are, then it will be easier for you to not interfere with the client's therapeutic process by interjecting those measures of your own self.
Do you ever have situations where you work with the client's clergy members? Like, for example, if, like in a situation that Cecilia brought up, if there is a safety issue and domestic violence, and this person has a religious belief that she is not supposed to make this decision, and she needs to do something for her safety, but she really believes in her head this is not something that she is supposed to do. But she says, okay, well, can my pastor come in and sit in this session with me, or can I have maybe a minister that's a female minister come with me? I mean, do you guys get creative with your clients? Because I guess what I'm trying to do is find out a way for the more practical solutions to remove barriers, because I know that there are situations that people get into where they do feel like if they have a religious belief that I'm not supposed to get divorced, maybe I need to find an apartment, and maybe we need to go through counseling, and maybe we need to reconcile, and maybe we need to go through steps. I'm trying to find out, is there a way where it's not as cut and dry as divorce? And maybe it's not a domestic violence situation. Maybe it's adultery. Maybe it's mental illness. Maybe he's bipolar, and maybe he needs to see one therapist. She needs to, maybe she's an enabler, or maybe there's a different treatment plan. I'm just trying to figure out what type of creative solutions that a therapist can offer, and if there are any type of solutions that you guys get creative with.
Carmel?
Well,
Was that still?
I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, was that still me, or what were you?
Well,
what were we doing?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my fault.
Maybe if you can answer that, Etoya, and then Carmel, if you can piggyback off of his answer, I'd like to hear from you also from your perspective, your thoughts on that question.
I mean, yeah, so there's a lot. I mean, that's a really, really broad brushstroke, right? I think that in terms of creative solutions to situations, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you. You're good.
Hold on one second, Mike. Okay, so in terms of creative solutions, again, I think it really depends on, again, the individual situation. I think ethically, we always have to be aware of and sensitive to any situation that would indicate safety issues or anything that with us, as reporters, we obviously want to be sensitive to any situation that would, be an indication of, violence or, safety issues or anything that we would have to escalate or whatever have you. That's that. But I think, so the answer to the question, I guess, specific to, whatever the actual presenting situation is, I know I've never dealt directly with a clergy member. Well, that's not true. I have a couples client where one of the husband is a minister, but I haven't dealt with it to that level. But in terms of creative solutions, I mean, absolutely. People talk about separation all the time or whatever have you. I just need to get a place, whatever, and don't understand just the details of, the need for a separation plan, that needing to be a plan and not just an emotional reaction to something, or while you're separated, having a reunification plan, and some of these things that, that go into that, that whole equation. But I think that it, again, is specific to whatever the presenting issues are with that particular client, and then making sure that we, again, are streamlined ethically when we're listening to these situations.
Okay.
Just to follow up with what Etoya just said, he basically covered everything. The only thing I would like to add is that it really depends on clergy coming in. Do you have a license or not? That's one issue, because if you're a licensed clinician, there are some things that you simply can't do without a release of information, such as allowing people like clergy to come into session. So for myself, as long as I have a release of information, if someone wants to bring a member of their support system in for a session, that's totally fine. But I personally haven't had that happen. A lot of the times, once people come in for clinical counseling, most of the time they've already sought out some type of help, support, or services from their church or clergy. And so they're trying a different route typically when they come in to work with a licensed clinician. So, and then also as far as a plan goes, obviously as licensed clinicians, our training, basically from the start, we're trained to not give solutions to their problems. So we wouldn't be suggesting divorce, even in a situation in which there is some abuse, but we would certainly be helping them to look at options. Ethics is going to be first and foremost, but then also looking at safety and making sure their safety is at the forefront of everything. So wouldn't necessarily suggest getting divorced, but let's get you in a safe place, and let's look at what your options are. Let's come up with a plan, and what's the ultimate goal. It's going to be based on whether or not they want to work on the marriage, they want to save the marriage and remain in the marriage, and we would typically meet them where they are. But like I say, ethics and safety come first, and then let's look at what needs to happen, whether it's therapy, whether it's there's some type of legal action that needs to be taken, and what needs to happen mentally, legally, and ethically first.
Okay. Thank you.
Butler, 2 questions. Go ahead and pick your panelists.
Okay. Question I have is, I've seen recently where it seems like there's been an increase in pastors committing suicide. And I just want to kind of touch on your opinion on why do you think that is, when I would say, I guess a pastor is looked at someone who has all the answers or has a strong support system if he has other ministers around to talk to, whether it be male or female, to talk his issues out with. So why do you think it's getting to a point where someone who relies heavily on his faith, who prays so much, has a relationship with God, of course, why do you think they're also succumbing to suicide the same way, I'll just use, as the world is, so to speak? And I guess I'll talk to, I'll send this to Carmel side and hear from her for my question before.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were discussing earlier, and I think that this is why we're seeing an increase in numbers of people of faith coming in for clinical counseling. Is for that very reason, seeing the high-profile pastors committing suicide and so on and so forth. And in fact, in the Black community, you know, if you guys think about it, a lot of the times when we see that someone is trying to improve their life, they're wanting to somehow feel better, get better, the first thing a lot of people say is they're going to start going to church, or they do something in regards to their faith instead of seeking out clinical or professional counseling. So that's something that we've historically done, but now we're seeing that even high profile pastors who seemingly have it all together and have everything are taking their own lives. So they have poor coping skills, poor mental health. And so I think now people are realizing that there's some other help out there that they maybe should be seeking out. And I think, you know, we have to look at the fact that what is the point of improving spiritually? Because obviously the closer you get in your faith, the closer you get to God, you're going to improve in that area. But if you have poor coping skills and poor mental health, then it's almost all for nothing. And you're kind of still out there. I've had a lot of people, Christians come in for counseling that have had trauma historically in the past, sometimes over a couple of decades ago, and they got really heavy into their faith and improved and got stronger in that area. And then here they are 2 decades later, still dealing with that same trauma because they never addressed it in a way that they needed to. So I think people are just starting to get it, that is not only about going to church, that there's other things that they certainly should be doing. And, you know, neglecting to deal with your mental health while strengthening the area of spiritual health is no different than dealing with your mental health and not dealing with your physical health. You know, you're going to therapy, you're taking your medication or whatever needs to happen, but you don't exercise, you don't eat healthy. Ultimately, that's going to cause some deterioration in your physical health because, or in your mental health, because you're going to probably get depressed if you get physically sick. So, you know, it's a holistic thing. You know, you got to do the spiritual thing. You have to take care of your mental health and seek out services, and also take care of your physical health.
Gotcha. Okay. Another question, I guess it's kind of like a mental health question, but in the Black church a lot, you know, that they have these healing services, whether you say, come up to the altar, you come up to the altar either if you're physically sick or you have some other issue that you're dealing with. I guess this is more of a broad question. Why do you think that most, and I'll say Black churches don't have, I would say, like health and wellness ministries? So for example, if you do have people in your congregation who are going through physical issues, why isn't there somewhere they can go to say, hey, talk to this person that can get you on a diet plan, get you an exercise plan, to, like when you say, I've heard a lot of you say you got to do the work. After you receive the prayer, do the work. But it seems like they're constantly waiting on the miracle versus taking the accountability upon themselves. Even also with mental pain, if you might be missing a loved one, you go up to God to heal you, touch you, just to make it go away, and it doesn't go away. So mentally, talk about what's some of the work that they can do mentally to heal themselves from mental pain. After the prayer is done, describe what some of that work is, I would say, mentally. I'll go to Etoya.
Yeah, so you know, in terms of the work, man, I think it's just like understanding these things specific to the individual, right? Because faith and hope are emotional conditions, you know, that are just one part of this whole continuum, right? Because these conditions exist inside of a system, which is religion, right? So the value and belief systems of the thoughts or whatever. So there's just this whole ball of stuff, right, that creates this condition. I think with regard to, you know, just the healing and the work or whatever have you, you know, this is the healing circle, the prayer going down to the altar and all that stuff. That's the backside of it, because we don't address the preventative measures that will keep us from having to do the healing circles, right? And so that's where the conversation, this is where we get off track with it a little bit is, yeah, like once I'm at stage 4, I'm at the end of it, you know what I mean? And I go down to the altar, I'm already stage 4, like where am I mentally, emotionally when
Bring it up, Fred.
we should have been a Black church, things that are culturally relevant to the Black community, which is physical health, these various aspects of physical health or whatever have you. And unfortunately, a lot of churches, because there's 11 churches in every community, like everybody, people not qualified to be able to provide this information or these services, and churches are not networked together in these communities to make sure people are receiving. I mean, there's so much involved in the system of church that makes this a very difficult conversation to have. But at the end of the day, we have to address these things proactively. We can talk about if you belong to a church that's not addressing, again, no disrespect, like my man said, but this is real, right? Because I have room on my couch. I'm taking time. Like, this is the reality of the situation is if we're not talking about things that are relevant and pertinent to the community which these churches stand, then they're unfortunately and ultimately doing a disservice to the people that are under that roof, because outside of those 4 walls, there's still high blood pressure, there's still diabetes, there's still high cholesterol, and so on and so forth. And if we're not, those are the things that have to be built into the system proactively so that there's fewer people that need to go down to the altar to receive it. Because now we've built up, again, this combination of physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, and so on. And now we've created proactively and preventatively situations that would, have fewer people, at the end of their rope or desperate like that.
Charletta, we're going to let you have one more question for the last 3, Cecilia, Tyler, and Tessie, and then we're going to have some concluding thoughts. Then I'll wrap it up to a lot of time frame. And like I said, if anybody wants to stay on afterwards, we'll definitely have additional conversation going, but I have to get off for Nelly and Luda.
Okay, so Tessie, I have a question for you. It's kind of geared towards the men. So there was this discussion with, are you familiar with John Gray? I don't know if you're familiar with John Gray, but it was John Gray and Kirk Franklin. And they were talking about how with men, before they get married, a lot of times they sleep with different women at one time, and they're not monogamous. So they tend to sleep with one woman, or they date several women at one time, and they may go to one for one thing, another one specializes in another thing. Did you see that conversation?
No, but this is a testament to faith and how God works, because I have a philosophy for that. So you finish your question.
Okay, so another woman specializes in another thing. So it may be a rotation of, like, say, maybe 4 different women. So at some point he decides, I'm ready to settle down. I want to get married. And he meets the one in his mind. And he decides, I'm going to flip a switch and I'm going to be faithful. But what happens is he gets married, and in his mind, he thinks he can be faithful. But he puts the pressure of everything that he's been doing sexually and physically with all of these women. He puts all that pressure on this one woman. Mm-hmm. And now she has the pressure of trying to keep up with what he's been doing. And even though he wants to be faithful, chances are he's probably not going to be successful at it. And I need to know your thoughts on that, because there are a lot of people that are trying to be faithful, and they intend to be faithful, and they don't want to hurt this person that they end up getting married to, because they think that they want to be faithful, but this is what's in them, and they don't know how to cut that out. And you as a Christian, you and I both know that these are soul ties, and maybe they don't know how to break these soul ties. And I need to know your thoughts as a man. What do you think about that?
Okay, start the timer, Dr. Duncan. Tell me wave when I got 10 seconds left so I don't leave my point hanging. So here's the deal. So I'll just use my own personal experience. I truly enjoyed bachelorhood before I met my wife. I was completely plugged into the patriarchal system, and I assumed and thought and wanted the women in my life to be there for their purpose, to do what I need them to do to satisfy me so that I could feel whole. One of the undertakings that I took as a man when I began to unplug from this patriarchal system is, number one, it's unfair, completely unfair to put that level of expectation on one woman. Some women actually try and meet that obligation and live a horrible life because of it. They're doing things when they don't feel like it. They having sex when they don't feel like it. It's just horrible for them, and they just put the smile on and they try to make it. That's unfair. So if I'm subjecting my wife to that level of unfairness, then I'm not loving her like I say I do. That's number one. So one of the things I understood for myself is that she doesn't have to change. I have to change. I have to look back at that and say, okay, where I enjoyed myself once being able to do that, I have to become new now. So when you take the covenant of marriage, see, a lot of people, you can go to the court and get married. You can go to church and just stand there and get married. But did you take a covenant with God on that relationship? Because that's the only other entity that belongs inside of that marriage is yourself, God, and your spouse, right? So after I realized how unfair that was, it became easier and easier for me to leave other people alone and be able to appreciate those things that my wife have to offer me over what I actually desire. And the more I did that, the less and less I desired those other things. And then she became the apple of my eye and my most desired. Those things that she had to offer. But I had to change. I had to do the soul searching. I had to look within. Whoever said and wrote that we deserve all that anyway? That's the patriarchal system that says if I wake up at 10 o'clock, if I wake up at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday and I can't sleep, let me hit old girl and see if she up. That's the patriarchal system that says I can interrupt somebody else's sleep for my own sexual desires or whatever I desire in that moment. So once I became less selfish, once I truly began to love somebody, like the Bible says, husbands, love thy wife as Christ had loved the church and gave himself for it. Well, we all know that Christ died for the church. So that death doesn't always have to be a physical death. I don't have to leave this planet. I don't have to climb in a casket, but maybe my old ways can die. Maybe my old thought patterns can die. Maybe I can let die the need for other women and other types of satisfactions and allow that to be filled with something else. Like my wife's laughter, like seeing her happy, like watching my children grow in my home, like looking in my son's room before I go to work and see him still sleeping before he get up to go to school. Those are privileges that I wouldn't give away. You have other things can soon become more important than your own fleshly physical desires if you unplug from the patriarchal system. But that's the problem. Most men don't, because all that stuff feel good. It feel good to be the king. It feel good to be selfish. Those things were good to me. Why would I give that up? Then don't. Just don't get married.
There it is.
Don't. You don't want to give it up, don't. Just don't get married. And if you do, then you've decided to give that up. You know what I'm saying? You've decided to give that up. And if you want your marriage to be blessed, then you'll be in a situation where you don't even need that. It's a much better feeling to be in the presence of beautiful women and not put that type of stuff on them. I walk away feeling better than I would if I tried to talk to each and every last one of y'all. If I tried to bag each and every last one of y'all. How arrogant of me. Who wants to live arrogant? Arrogance and pride is synonymous. Pride comes before a fall. Who want to keep getting shot down? You know, you might get 10, but you lost 90. Tell the truth, player. Your odds that's not really adding up. Right. You're just making it look like it is. You see what I'm saying? But it's all the changing comes from within. There's nothing that a sister can do. And I urge a woman to not even try to do that. Don't try to measure up to 4 or 5 other women, what 4 or 5 other women did for that man. Either he'll change or he won't. But don't you put yourself through that. It's certainly not worth it. No, my daughter gonna be hot out here. I hope I answered, Charletta.
Yes. I just want to make sure everybody out there heard you.
We like Tessie. We like you, Tessie. This is great.
Preach that thing.
Oh, I'm a feminist. Oh, you can believe me. I'm a feminist. I'm on board, man. We've been living foul, bro.
We must replay this for everyone.
That's right. It's on YouTube. It's on podcast, and definitely please share them. You know, Cecilia, Tyler. Let's start off with Cecilia, and then Tyler. We'll bring it home for that question, and then we'll do closing thoughts.
Well, I don't know what else to say after Tessie didn't just set it out there like that.
Pass the collection plate.
Man,
Right?
you hear me?
So,
The
but
cash up.
to his point, I think is important that when you start to consider wanting to change somebody else and having, excuse me, something's in my eye, having someone else to live up to certain expectations, then we need to, in therapy, my suggestion would be for us to explore what's going on with you that one person cannot satisfy you. What happened to you? What has been your experiences that you need all of this from another person? Because what you're needing, that has nothing to do with her, but everything to do with yourself. So as we start to explore that, then we can start to identify some skills and some strategies to help you kind of rein in, or even consider if marriage is a thing for you. Like he said, these are the expectations of marriage, and you get to say in your life whether or not you want to move in that way. And once you identify who you are, who your mission, your purpose, and what your expectations are in life, if you say, yeah, that's not something that I want to explore, you get to make that decision and say, no, I don't want to be married. But if you are, then we need to consider what marriage is and how you can adjust or figure out how to make marriage work for yourself.
Tyler.
I think pretty much everything has been said, but I'm going to say something that might kind of blow the socks off some folks. But newsflash, everybody doesn't want to get married.
Right.
You know, and contrary to popular belief, I know that's not popular with the church. I know I get that, but everybody's mission in life is not to be married. So that being understood, I think, like Tessie was saying, and also Cecilia, just being upfront and honest with what your expectations are. You know what I mean? I don't have to, if I'm not trying to be your wife or your end all, your be all, then I shouldn't be out here, spinning my wheels and exhausting myself trying to measure up to all these different expectations that you may have. And I think, I don't know, but I'm a firm believer, we don't have the ability to change anybody. But what we do have is the ability to affect change in that person. I can't change you, but I can create an environment where you want to change. And that's the truth in any relationship. I've seen situations where people had an alternative lifestyle or whatever they were doing, prior to coming into contact with that one particular person. And because of what they saw in that particular person or the potential of that relationship, they made the necessary adjustments. Now, that person that they were dealing with didn't give them any ultimatums, didn't say, you're going to either do this, that. It didn't have to be, we have to get away from this distorted narrative that in order for love or relationship to be healthy and functional, that it's got to go through the ringer. You know what I mean? That you got to break me all the way. It's got to be broken all the way down. It's got to be distorted. And we got to go through some things in order to be a healthy and functional relationship in the end. Do relationships go through things? Absolutely. But I think if there's honest and open communication at the very beginning about what it is that I'm looking for and what it is that you're looking for, and if we can meet each other's needs I think somebody said it earlier, where we are at that particular moment, you know what I mean? I think that then we have a better, there's a better possibility of it being a lasting functional relationship. But I think a lot of times when there's some misunderstanding or there's some miscommunication or there's some mixed signals being sent out, that is where the problems and that's where all of the issues arise. I thought that I was getting this. I thought this is what you wanted. I
Right.
thought I was accommodating some things. And when those needs or those expectations aren't met, then now you got some angry people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So just wanted to be able to start off with the closing thoughts. This event was supposed to be from 3:30 to 5. I figure it'll probably go over a little bit. Being very respectful of the time of the panelists. And, you know, like I said, after the recording, anybody who wants to stay on and continue the conversation, we definitely will do that. So we will still remain live on Facebook for a minute. But before we conclude, I really want to say thank you very much for the panelists for jumping on. They did this, everybody, for their own time, okay? When I approached them, you know, some of them I had a relationship with, some of them I didn't. I mean, now it's just something like, you know, Tessie and Cecilia and Carmel, you know, I mean, I just met y'all, you know, for real, just these last 2 weeks and stuff and working and planning this project. And I just think that you guys are phenomenal. Tyler, I already texted you, just said, you're dope. You never cease to amaze me. I know, like I said, I know Tyler for a hot minute. Etoya, I've seen Frat grow, you know, from the college days on up and stuff. And, you know, when we created this project, when I started off with the project, the premise of it was to not only highlight some of my thought processes, but be able to collectively bring other like-minded individuals. And this is the beginning of something beautiful and something grand. Somebody inboxed me and asked, you know, were these therapists in St. Louis? Yes, we're all local. You know, we all stay, you know, within 30 minutes from each other, one way or another. And when this pandemic ceases, I would love for all of us to get together somehow, some way, and get people into a room to really interact. I know it's kind of limited in this format. We spent over 3 hours recording over a variety of topics. There was still a lot of topics we did not have a chance to get on. And again, I'm just being respectful of everybody's time. But this is a very serious issue in our community, along with all the other issues, you know, that we covered prior to this recording, and issues that we're going to cover, you know, concerning education, finances, social change, you know, how to affect social change. You know, we'll probably continue this type of format once in a blue moon, but please, these are experts. If, you know, when I get these profiles loaded, please look at their background and their expertise. They're more than qualified. Like I think Etoya had said, or maybe it was Carmel that said something like there were people who were out there basically faking a funk saying that they're a counselor. These are actually certified therapists. They went through the rigors of the education. They got the certification process. They actually have the experience. I can just provide an opinion. These people are providing facts. And if you want to find self-healing, this is where it begins. Reach out to these therapists. You know, like I said, they donated their time. I hope that somebody has been touched somehow, some way, to be able to say, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to talk to Tessie about something that's going on with my son. I have a child that's suicidal. I'm going to talk to Mrs. Carter. We're having marital relationships. We're going to sit down with Carmel. As a man, I have a lot of anger and rage, and I want to break bread with Etoya White. This is what those panel discussions is for. That's what it's all about. So we're going to go one more time around the panel with concluding thoughts. Just please keep it no more than 90 seconds. Tessie, because you're Tessie, I'm going to let you go last. We're going to let you go last, boss. So, appreciate it, man. Go ahead and start off the closing thoughts.
Oh, and me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, shit, my bad. Yeah, man, I just think, you know, situations like these, I think, you know, Tessie, one of the most critically important things that, you know, has to happen is the focus on grassroots. Like, again, man, we can't solve all the problems, and we need to learn to be, you know, we need to learn to be okay with that. But it will take grassroots effort, man. It starts with every individual and every household with regard to, you know, voting and economics and education systems and so on and so forth, man. We got to stop focusing on the president and start focusing on the mayor. We got to start in our own cities, our own communities. I don't give a damn what anybody in the White House is doing. I'm interested in downtown St. Louis and Clayton and so on and so forth, because this is the community that I live in. This is where we can affect the change that is necessary to spread out and branch out and affect other areas, man. So, you know, it starts with us as individuals, man. If something's not right, at least come and ask a question. If you're feeling some kind, ask a question and let that be the start to a non-imposing conversation, that could lead you down the path to wellness. And we're here for that. We're here for all of that.
Appreciate you, brother, man. Definitely appreciate it. And I'm catching up with you and Tessie, man. After this is done, we're gonna sit down. We're gonna have to definitely chop it up a lot more.
Drinks on me. Drinks on me.
Absolutely, man. As soon as everything is open and stuff, because man, I'm dying for a great burger.
You know what it is, bro.
Absolutely, Carmel.
I think I would just like to finish with just the fact that mental illness is something that we need to know what it looks like in the Black community. Historically, we've always thought that it looks like, pathology, bizarre behavior, a person talking to themselves, hallucinating, experiencing delusions and things like that. And that's not always the picture of mental illness. And I just want to just wrap up with saying that sometimes it looks like multiple failed relationships. Sometimes it looks like inability to maintain stable employment or just stability altogether. Sometimes it looks like impulsivity. Sometimes it's explosiveness, and it doesn't always look bizarre as one might think it does. And so just make sure that you're paying attention to yourselves and to your loved ones, and that you remember that there is help out there. And as we talked about last week, if you are someone who doesn't have health insurance, there's other alternatives that you might be able to go through in order to get some assistance. And then also, I just want to say something real quick to all of the clinicians out there that might be listening and watching us. Just make sure that you're taking care of yourself, engaging in self-care for yourself as you're doing a lot of helping and pouring into other people. We should be exercising and journaling and getting rest and making sure we have a support system too.
That's amazing. I appreciate you, Carmel. Tyler, I know you don't have a podcast, but you do have a book. If you want to talk about, plug your book. I thought it was interesting.
Hold, please.
Uh-oh. She left.
She's getting her book.
She's getting her book. You know what? Hey, I got to plug it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you guys are donating your time. If you got something on there, people need to come check y'all out too. This ain't about me. This is about all of us,
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay. Fairly bruised, but far from broken.
Hold it up a little bit higher.
Can you see it?
Yup.
And that's me on the cover. Okay. No, but at any rate, what I want to say is this has been a phenomenal experience, just to say the least. Quantitatively, I want everybody out there, clinicians and clinicians, not clinicians, to understand, just like you said, Terrence, you guys have received 3 hours of unadulterated clinical information from licensed, credentialed, trained clinicians. I don't know if you can do the math, but that's a lot of money.
It is.
We were in a clinical setting. And we donated this, and I'm not saying that to get kudos, I'm saying that in hope that it's a testament to all of our passion and level of commitment to getting the word out there and increasing knowledge and making you guys more aware of what mental health, how vital mental health is to our community. There are I feel so empowered at the conclusion of this, because now I know two, African-American male clinicians that I can call on. I know someone else, another female clinician that I can contact and say, hey, I've got somebody over here. Because Cecilia, you're in St. Louis, right?
Yeah.
I know somebody on the other side of the river that I can refer to. So this has been a spectacular event in just that regard alone. In terms of, there was something else I had written down. So again, being thankful for the opportunity to do this. I also know with the amount of trauma and mental health issues that we see in our communities alone, there is enough for all of us to eat. You know what I mean? So in terms of relying on each other as resources, referring each other, Carmel and I swap, we refer to each other all the time. This is not a competition. This is an effort, an ongoing effort to get our people healed. And that's by any means necessary. So this is a great start. It's the start of some open dialogue and getting the information out there, making people aware of how they can go about getting services. I know that some people have gotten some information this evening that gives them, not only some hope, but an idea of how to even start the process in terms of getting help for unresolved issues. So I am eternally grateful for the opportunity. I'm gonna tell you guys, Terrence will have you, me and Terrence been rocking a long time. And I'm telling you, parents will tell you, we have had plenty of times where we sat down, let's just sit down and chop it up. It's supposed to be 30, 45 minutes. I look up 3-4 hours. We sat there and chopped it up and could go 3 or 4 more hours because that's how serious and committed we are. So thank you guys so much for being such a captive group of panelists and giving me some awesome information.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tyler. Like Tyler said, you know, this is not a competition. There's enough opportunity for all of us to eat, but you know, the biggest thing is we have 6 African-American clinicians who are giving back to the community. You know, they could have done anything else and stuff, but for 2 days, 3 hours, definitely appreciate it. Cecilia?
Yeah, first I wanted to say thank you for having me. I am honored to be on a panel with such amazing therapists. It's a blessing just to be able to interact in that way. The second thing I want to say is I love us. Black people are some of the most resilient, creative, amazing people in the universe, right? And our history here, and I reference that a lot because I understand the way trauma informs the way we move and the way we be in the world. And I just want to encourage us as a people to be a little bit more compassionate and understand if the sister is across the street yelling and screaming, maybe she just had a bad day. Don't assume the worst about one another. Because that comes from a space of understanding and maybe even bad experiences that informs that kind of rough or negative approach or thinking about one another. But just consider compassion and love for one another. And once we do that, we can create safe space for my brother or my sister or whoever to come in and say, you know what, today I'm having a rough day and I need somebody to talk to. That's how validation is the door to communication. And so we need to create safe spaces for one another to come in and talk. And if you don't have the answers, it's okay to refer your friend, your cousin, your mother to somebody else who does.
Absolutely.
And so I'm grateful for this opportunity and this platform to give everyone else a referral system, just a beginner referral system. I know several other therapists including all of us that could support. We have groups available. There are so many resources that are available to us that we need to tap into. The last thing is just considering, like Carmel said, if you have Medicaid, there are a lot of therapists on Psychology Today that you can look up. You just go to Psychology Today, type in Medicaid, and you can find a therapist that will accept your insurance. If you have insurance, no matter what insurance you have, you can just flip their card on the back. It'll say customer support. You call them and ask them for a therapist in your network, and they can give you a therapist. If you have a preference for, say, a Black therapist or a male or a female therapist, tell them what your preferences are, and they can accommodate you in that way. A lot of therapists have sliding fee scales. So there are a lot in community-based organizations. There are so many resources for us. Tap in, look into it. You can get the support that you need. All right, I'm done with my spiel. Thank you so much.
It's all good, Soror. Butler, as one of the co-hosts, we've been doing this since the beginning of the pandemic. We talked about it for a while. This is our 6th official episode. Concluding thoughts?
Man, it's been amazing just seeing the growth of the topics that's been presented, and like I said, to literally have 5 licensed clinicians here. Like I didn't even know there were 5 Black licensed clinicians in the Metro East area. Period.
Wow.
So to see 5 here is mind blowing to me. But what I just hope that anyone that's listening now will listen in the future. Definitely take care of your mental health. No one's been talking about self-care. You can't keep pouring out into people and not pour back into yourself. You have to make sure your foundation is strong so you can be effective in your neighborhood, your communities, and with your own families. You know, you want to always be as strong as you can. You can't learn the power of the word no. You know, you can't say yes to everything. You have to tell people no sometimes. It's okay. And you're doing it for your own peace, your own strength, your own mental health. Because if you constantly telling people yes to every little thing that they're requiring of you, then you're no good to yourself and the people you love. So definitely reach out to one of the clinicians here if you're having any issue whatsoever, and definitely make an appointment with one of them. Just if you need to vent, cry, scream, whatever you do in the sessions, and I'm sure they'll be glad to help you out.
Absolutely, absolutely. The other thing too, just briefly, pick up the phone. It just means so much, especially during this pandemic. I've talked to more people on the phone these last couple of months than I probably did, last 6 months. Just pick up the phone, man. Just show that you give a damn. Just to say, hey, you good? Or hey, to borrow Fred's term, you good, bro? I mean, just ask on, how people are doing. Just even if it's 5 minutes, it definitely matters. Charletta? Tessie, you gotta stay home though, man. Charletta?
I just want to say thanks again to everyone. Last week, I was the camera person. So this week, I just wanted to formally introduce myself. My nonprofit is Quality of Life, where we focus on strengthening families. My coaching business is another level. My project that I'm working on now is Rocket Fuel. It airs in June. So I will make sure you guys have that information, and I invite you guys to tune in. What we do is the older generations kind of pour in to the younger generations, and my topic is relationships, dating advice for the younger generation. So I'm kind of excited about that. So, and let's see, I think that's it. But thank you guys so much for giving your time and your talent. You didn't have to be here. You could be anywhere. I also extend my, whatever I can do, my expertise. My educational background is theology and business management. So if you ever want to message me or call me and pick my brain, whatever I can do. And whenever we get together, please make sure I'm invited, Doc, and I will be there. So, because I like burgers too. So, but it was a pleasure meeting everyone, and I really enjoyed myself, and I learned a lot. So, thanks again.
Absolutely. I'll definitely keep everybody in the loop. We'll definitely try to get everybody together somehow, some way. Tessie, go ahead and bring it home, baby.
First of all, let me say that I'm completely humbled by being on this panel, by being invited into this space to do this work. It's a completely humbling experience. So thank you all, the procurers, Dr. Terrence, Butler, Charletta. Thank you guys for having me here. Fellow panelists, thank you for tolerating me over these 3+ hours. I really appreciate it. I want Black men to know that, brother, you on my mind. I'm concerned about us, our state of mind. I'm concerned about how far behind we are with what should be our progression. I do recall a time in history, and you can Google it if you want to, that we were kind of leading the forefront. We were out here getting it, and we seem to have slipped behind. And I want us to start catching up again. I just want us to start winning, man. I'm ultimately concerned about how easy it is for us to hurt one another, how easy it is for us to walk away from one another, to be done with one another, man. I've yet to meet a brother that I don't want to live. I just don't get it. Some of the greatest men that I've met beyond my father and those men who were there in the beginning have been my frat brothers, man. And I just really appreciate who they are and how they got me where I am and how they keep me going where I'm going. I appreciate all the support. I'm thankful. I'm a thankful person, man. I'm thankful that I met Etoya on a humbug and we were able to sit down and break bread and, have a couple of drinks and get to know each other on an intimate level. And I can now call him friend. That means a lot to me. I just want us to win as a whole, man. I just want my people to win. And I see being a therapist as my way of fighting that fight. I used to walk the streets with another grassroots group called Tahi Youth Group and tell people that they can't sell drugs on this corner no more. Well, that was in my 20s. I was a lot more brazen then. I'll do it again. I don't have to. But My point is I have to keep the fight, and this is my way of fighting now. This is my way of staying in the fight and staying in the forefront. And finally, before I check out, men, I want you to pay attention to that patriarchal system, man, that we subscribe to, man. It's time to let those things go so that we can live better and we can live happier. A lot of the stress that we live under comes from our interpersonal relationships. And that stress is there because we don't know how to manage those interpersonal relationships. And then, so when you live in stress, you teach stress. And then we all know what stress does to the mind and then ultimately what stress does to the body. So unstress yourself, fellas. Unplug from the patriarchal system, man. And know that there's brothers out here that got your back, man. I love all y'all. Peace.
And that concludes this particular very special panel discussion on Mahogany Thoughts, faith, mental health in the Black community. I'm Dr. Terrence Duncan, and we are out.